Kia ora, team. So lovely to be back with you here in the best of BHN. Tonight we're looking at May. It's the 5th month. January, February, March, April, May. The best of May for you tonight. And as you already know, if you've seen any of the previous ones, it's not just the best of. It's the best of the best of the best of. Because there is so much of that could have been best of that purely for time limits we had to leave in the hard drive and not put it out to you. So it's really interesting, good stuff today, and lots of good and interesting guests as well. That's one of the more important things. I kind of wanted to try and get an interview in each of the shows, maybe not all of the shows, but most of the shows. So hopefully you're enjoying it. And as I've said before, this will be on all of the platforms. If you're a podcast listener, it'll be going out on those platforms on the day after we do it in real time. So tomorrow morning from tonight, it will be there. Makes sense? I think that makes sense. And also there'll be some clips and stuff going around Twitter and Facebook and video, full episodes on Facebook and here as well. So wherever you're watching it, I guess that's where you're watching it. Tonight on the show, Damien Grant is full of crap. Bomber has a head of steam and Craig Renney is a godsend. We're also going to be having a look at former ACT, National and New Zealand First MPs saying that this government will not last the full term. I believe from memory that was an interview with Tova O'Brien. Harry Tam joins us again to talk about the new gang squad this government is bringing in. And finally, you know, those free speech purists, I think the last episode we talked a bit about free speech union, but those free speech purists, in my opinion, they're really not. And we have an episode tonight with Karen, Sean, Oliver Plunket, talking about how government needs to regulate speech. Hang on. This is the person or one of the people who screams from the rooftops. They don't have their comments open. They're hindering speech. But when it's something that Plunket doesn't like, well, he wants to regulate speech as well. I tell you what, I think we'll start with that this evening. Coming up next, Karen Plunket in his hypocritical best about why the government from time to time should actually regulate speech. In other words, being anti-free speech. Let's look at that. In Karen's world, it's free speech as long as I agree with it. It's what woke means is anything I disagree with. So speaking of authoritarians, that was old Karen. So we'll play a bit of this. And, you know, I think we're going to have to turn this into a drop at some stage, Chewie. But this is the start of the conversation when he was talking about the massive problem that there is with this young man and his app.
Now, the story that is published in the Post has a picture of the guy who runs the website, and he looks, well, spends a lot of time in his mum's bedroom and a bed. He looks a bit like that guy, Pat Brittenden from Big Hairy News.
Name check.
To be honest.
I've got to say as well, he actually gave the show name out. Didn't do it, just like a name check. It was perfect. Thanks, Karen.
And it quotes our good friend and regular on the platform, Juliet Moses, the spokeswoman for the New Zealand Jewish Council. And she simply says it is anti-Semitic and I can't see any other way to look at it. Well, I agree with you. I agree.
We'll show you what this is. Whether you agree or disagree, right or wrong, there was a person supporting Palestine and Gaza by wanting to boycott Israeli products. And to say it's anti-Semitic, quote, and I can't see it any other way, speaks volumes as to potentially the messages that are needing to be put out on this platform. To say, like, if you don't want the Israeli soccer team to win, then you're anti-Semitic. If you don't want the Israeli business to win, then you're anti-Semitic. If you think people should stop using this, yeah. So we'll play a bit more of this and we'll get to it. I'm going to show you some of the stuff that he's badgering on about as well.
I agree with you, Julia. And as much as this website, Halal Kiwi, has absolutely no reach, the guy who's a computer programmer, his only advertiser is himself. It's a moment, and it's a bit pathetic. It's a bit rabbit hole radio-ish really. But I think the trend that it might suggest is really concerning.
What trend is that, Karen?
And gosh, this probably goes against my basic philosophy. I think this is a point where regulation and authorities do need to step in and say, no, you cannot do this. We cannot live in a country where you suggest boycotting or damaging people commercially because of their faith.
We should be living in a country where the state can step in and stop protest. Now,
What?
don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. Not against the Jewish faith, against Israeli product and business. Now, to be honest, I'm not even interested in having a debate or a conversation around, is the boycott a good idea? What I want to do is show you Karen showing his whole ass. And I'm sorry about the visual imagery that might have come with that for a split second. But he wants the state to regulate speech of someone protesting what Israel is doing in Gaza. That's what he just said, Chewie.
Also, he wants to mess with the free market. Like, if people don't want to buy a product because of where it's from, well, apparently you can't know where it's from. You can't make your decisions based on that. Oliver. I'll call him by his name. Oliver.
Ollie.
Little Ollie can't hold a coherent position to save his life. The fact that here we are, 6 months into this, and he's still coming down on the side of an authoritarian Israeli regime that is carpet bombing civilians, women, children, all of that sort of stuff. And he's still worried about someone with, by his own admission, has a tiny reach and a tiny, and suddenly that's enough for him to call on the government to step in. What the hell?
Hey, look, I guess the only problem for Karen now is, that he's happy that those woke Labourites got out, because maybe they would have crushed the neck of the person. Not these free speech people, not these David Seymours. They're all free speech. They wouldn't do that, would they?
I'm glad you brought up the woke okay. word. This is bad. He loves go woke, go broke, which is a boycott. Yeah. It is a call for a boycott. Yes. And that's the other thing. Look, I mean, how does he trip over? How does he stay upright without tripping over his own divergent positions on shit? I do not know.
Here's the thing, right? And this is what these kinds of, and I'm using people in the loosest possible sense when I'm talking about Karen. The only reason free speech needs to be protected is for the most abhorrent speech. Now, if Karen was right, which I don't believe he is, but if he was right about this gentleman's views, then those are the views that you need to have free speech for. Because you don't need to protect free speech when it's all love and mung beans and everybody gets on well. You need to protect it when it is the worst, most offensive tweet. But he comes across a very, very minor, I'm going to show you a very, very minor case of what he deems personally offensive. And all of a sudden, free speech goes out the window and the fucking government needs to regulate it. Just like that. Shoom. Over the most minor part of it. Kia ora again, team. Thanks for sticking with us. Hope you're enjoying the best of 2024 as we take a bit of a break through this 2024-2025 Christmas New Year period. Very, very important people to us from our audience are our patrons. Our patrons help pay the bills, especially through this Christmas period where we're not doing as much merch and we're not getting super chats and stuff. It's the people who are our patrons who get behind us and who help us pay for all the stuff that you're doing and watching right now, all the technology we're using, all the internet we're using, the power for what we're doing. It's all based on what the patrons do. If you are interested in being a part of what we do, patreon.com/Big Hairy News, patreon.com/Big Hairy News is how you do it, as we aim to continue bringing you this independent news network right the way through 2025 and beyond. Thanks for your support, and however you do it, even if it's just watching and sharing, it's really important to us. And let's get back to the best ofs. Shall I lighten up? I can lighten it up a bit. Shall I lighten it up a bit?
Go on. Oh, it's that fellow, convicted fraudster, Damien Grant. We're buddies.
We're going long tonight. That's all right. We'll whip through this, and you'll enjoy what you'll enjoy. So let's have a look at the working group last night. And this is quite a short clip. It's a minute 4. Actually, I've got 4 clips. They're all quite short. They're about a minute and a half each. I just wanted to play this because I knew you'd enjoy this one, Chewie. This is Damien Grant making up facts to suit his own narrative and being called out for it.
But there was not a single nurse, there was not a single doctor, there was not a single policeman.
We've just removed $100 million from the hospital budget in order to maintain balance.
Yeah, but that was $100 million that was probably jacked up in the last 6 months of the last government. This idea that they're slashing...
Do you have any evidence for that, Damien, or is that just a statement?
It's just a statement.
There you go.
This is the word.
It's the word probably. It's Damien Grant going, it's probably all Labor's fault. Can you prove that? No. We'll just keep going. We'll get to the end of this point as well, because Damien Grant has said about no nurses, no doctors, no nothing are going to be losing their jobs. And Craig Renney has gone, so where are they finding the $100 million from then? That's where we're at so far.
I was going to say, so that's my point. It's going to say,
but I mean, has there been, well, no, this is your statement, has there been a single doctor or nurse that has left as a result of budget cuts since this government came into office?
I would say that there's probably plenty of doctors and nurses.
That is not a yes or a no.
They're not going to be able to do their job because no one's doing the paperwork in the background.
Also, if they go into Australia, as many of them are.
Why are they moving to Australia?
Because the pay is better over there.
Right, okay, so break it down. The reason why they move, why can Australia...
So this is the libertarian argument. Of course the pay is better because the economy is richer. The economy does better. It's a chicken and egg argument. It's the cart before the horse. So he'll say, we're not going to pay them anymore until we get a better economy. Whereas the other person will be saying the economy is better, so they get paid more. And it goes round and round and round and round and round.
Pay more because
we've got a deunionised workforce that hasn't done far enough.
Hold on. No. If they have a deunionised workforce and they're paying more in Australia, then what does that tell you?
We have a deunionised workforce.
We have a deunionised workforce.
That's why they're able to go out there and get better
deals. Because they have fair pay agreements that actually help to deliver the pay for sustainable goods like that.
That is absolute nonsense. You can have a fair trade agreement in Kenya. It's not going to do any good. The reason why there are higher wages in Australia is a wealthier country. That's it. That's why. There is no other reason. And the union and the unions make absolutely no goddamn difference at the end of the day.
You're dead right. Australia is a wealthier country. It also has fair pay agreements. It also has a much more progressive taxation system and a capital gains tax.
And do you think all those things make it a wealthier country?
I have no idea, but I'm prepared to give it a bash.
I'm prepared to give it a bash, yes, Craig Renney. Let's play a couple other clips as we're going through. And Chewie, you can jump in and comment on that. It's clip number 2 from the show. Was actually Bomber going off. It's quite a cool clip to see Bomber when he gets a full head of speed up, talking about the anti-vaxxer brigades that are currently supporting Winston Peters. And that's really all the introduction you need. You'll enjoy this. He had a head of speed up on this one.
Background: the danger of Winston seducing the anti-vax crowd is that they are only sated by a Nuremberg trial where Jacinda and the front bench of the Labour Party are hanged outside Parliament.
And the media.
Oh yeah. Will Winston have to step up the media are all bribed big lie, or will it be some conspiracy about Maori secretly making another COVID virus that only infects Pākehā? Thoughts?
There's no question there. That is just another deranged Martin Bradbury rant with absolutely nothing behind it.
Winston Peters has been doing the media a bribed big lie because he needs to give his crazy anti-vax swamp kingdom nutters something to breathe in. And if you actually look at what those people are saying online,
which people?
They are his supporters, his anti-vax supporters,
but it's not
Voices
him.
for Freedom, who are working inside the New Zealand First machinery now, who are actually part of the legislative process, who pushed for the WHO to not be ratified and not signed because apparently they're all part of some global cabal.
Is there a question
global cabal?
Is there a question anywhere in this? I think to Craig's point that yes, there is a real problem that this government has. And speaking to some of the ministers there, it is a frustration that New Zealand First is a handbrake. And because New Zealand First
isn't it funny that Damien Grant is talking about Winston Peters being a handbrake as a negative, whereas Winston Peters has been got elected by saying I will be the handbrake and keep them in check, and he's being a handbrake according to Damien Grant.
For over a decade.
Yeah, for sure. All right, do you want to speak to anything yet, or I've got a couple more clips as well. It's enjoyable. Did you enjoy that? Do you like seeing Bomber with a full head of steam up there?
I mean, it was very unhinged, but yes, I do I do agree. I do enjoy. Look, it's funny how it's always the same with Damien. Is like he can go off on some unhinged tangent, some ridiculous hypothetical, but as soon as somebody else does, that's not playing a straight back.
Where's the question?
I mean, I've seen some of the comments to convicted for us, Damien Grant's columns in the paper, and he should know these unhinged people. They're his audience as well, so he can play that sort of thing of like, oh no, I'm a learned intellectual coming from a libertarian point of view.
Yeah.
But there's a Venn diagram in there of the people that think Winston's right to talk about the WHO, and the people that say socialism would never work, but libertarianism definitely will. I'm going to be a lord, not a serf.
I'm just going to pour myself a drink. The other thing that I found quite terrifying about that little commentary by Bomber was the idea of the Voices for Freedom fuckwits being involved in the legislation, the inner workings of New Zealand First. Now, I also came across this on Twitter today. The lovely Dudley Benson, who does a lot of sort of background work and looks into this sort of thing. People in Dunedin probably know him best as one of the men who owns Woof, said this. Update, 3 days in, far-right Reality Check Radio's website now states it has raised 71% of his 480 goal in 1 week. I've now heard via a close source that the three founders, Voices for Freedom's Claire Deeks, Alia Bland and Libby Johnson, each aim to receive a $100,000 salary from RCR. So that 480K that they're raising, according to insiders talking to Dudley, sounds like 3/5 of that is going to be to pay the 3 of the disinformation 12, Chewie. The allegations, and we put them out there as anonymous sources with no evidence to back that up. But
now,
those two things together.
While we were crowing about, Rabbit Hole Radio being off here and crying poor for money, there was a voice in the back of my head going, this is a rather excellent grift opportunity to really tighten the screws and really ramp up the urgency to get money rolling in. And almost straight from the get-go, they had a dollar for dollar matching thing. They were always going to achieve this somehow.
Well, I don't know.
It's a great branding and advertising opportunity.
The next part of the conversation on the podcast was then actually after Bomber and Damien Grant argued over things for a while. The lovely Craig Renney came in and actually answered the question.
What crazy thing is Winston going to use next?
I actually think there's something in your question, so stay with me, which is that Winston needs conflict.
Yeah, that's a good point.
New Zealand First needs conflict. It's how it garners votes. When it has gone out of Parliament, it's gone out of Parliament having been in government, having to defend its actions. And so Winston stops being Deputy Prime Minister in, I don't know how many, a year, a little over a year now.
Yeah.
He needs conflict after that point in order to say, I would have done it differently if I'd been re-elected. As a consequence, you need to do this for me.
Yeah,
and that conflict is the thing that he needs.
I wondered, however, and that has been proven time and time again because he has been tossed out. But you kind of think age 79 or so, a little bit south of Biden in the United States and wearing a hell of a lot better. But you kind of wonder at some point, because there is no real heir apparent.
Excuse me.
Who's that name?
I know. Just want to put it
Caught
out
in
there.
the act.
I know. Cheaters.
Right.
Will National throw a seat?
Yeah.
I would think it would be the logical thing to do. So if you did get 4%, you had a seat, you were back anyway.
That's how they get their agenda. Right? Well, because I think Winston's problem is that I don't think that Shane Jones and Cassie Costello and who's that Wellington mayor?
Andy Foster.
Yeah,
Foster. Those guys do not want to go to an early election.
No, they won't.
So in exactly the same way as he tried to bring down, was it Jenny Shipley or somebody else? Tauhena and all the rest defected, right?
Yeah, but you can't do that now under the current rules.
The Waka jumping.
Under the Waka jumping.
Yeah.
So there you go. So Craig actually answered it in quite a clever way. And there is one more clip, unless you'd like to speak to anything now. The last clip is can Luxon rein in Seymour? They had a bit of a debate around
Oh,
that.
yeah, no.
Just get for that.
Big play button. Go.
And this is actually, remember last night I said I flicked over and watched the live and I heard Damien Grant. Sorry, you want to add his title? Because you always like to add his title.
He's got many, but the one I like to go back to is convicted fraudster. Damien
Right,
Grant.
I've heard that too. Actually, he said something I agreed with, and this is about how Luxon's got no control whatsoever. So this is the conversation. Can Luxon rein in Seymour in particular?
I mean, 72 hours after warbling about how tough Luxon was in sacking Melissa and Penny, David Seymour was contradicting him and telling him, journalists, he couldn't sack any ACT MP like that. How much more undermining can Luxon put up with before he has to rein your mate David in?
Well, he can't rein in Seymour, nor can he rein in Winston Peters, because they are in a coalition. But I don't see that as being necessarily fatal to Luxon. I think if Luxon just has to play the cards that he's dealt, and like I was saying before, because both Seymour and Peters have their own kind of worldview, and they're quite good at articulating it.
Very good.
Luxon doesn't have an alternative to go out there, and so he's not going out there explaining to the public what he wants and why should we do this thing? Where is the destination? Where is this bus going?
Yeah.
I don't think he needs a vision, but at the very least he needs to say this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. And he doesn't have that. And if he did, I don't think it would matter what the two wings would do, because he could say, we're going to do this thing, we're going to do A, B, and C, and this is the outcome that we're going to get. And he's not doing it, and he needs to.
Follow-up question, what number does National need to drop to where Luxon's leadership is in trouble? They're 34 at the moment in the internal Labour, 36 in this latest poll. Where do they need to drop?
I don't think National is going to think like that. I think National, to be fair to National, they've got an idea about what they want to do. Right? It's fairly narrow from my perspective, and it's not particularly ambitious. But they have an idea where they want to go to, and people like Pink and Bishop and so forth, they're on board and they know where they're going. They've got a pretty good relationship going with ACT, a bit more of a complex relationship with New Zealand First. I actually don't think that's... And if they fall to, in the high 20s, I don't think they're going to panic. They know what they're doing. That might change, a year out from an election, but no, I don't think that's on their horizon.
Quick round. How long?
There you go. So that's there's not a heck of a lot in there that I think he is wrong on from the perspective. He's got no control.
No, I've got a lot of criticisms, but not.
And I don't think that Luxon's going anywhere. I don't think that if it did drop to the high 20s or something. One of the interesting points from the podcast that I didn't show a clip for is one of the points that got made a couple of times, and I think from Fran O'Sullivan made it, is if at some point they're going to need to make a decision that if they are projecting a tough election next time around and maybe a one-term government, they can get a lot done in one term, and maybe they need to go harder to set things in motion for 3 years rather than think about 6 or 9. And that was mentioned a couple of times. That's an interesting and frightful experience. Maybe that would imply they're not going hard enough right now, Chewie, that they may need to pick up on it and push harder.
I saw a comment, I highlighted it last night, we didn't get to it, but it was an interesting theory that the government is front-loading so much bullshit into the start of their first term that they get it out of the way.
Right.
People's memories are short, right? We'll hopefully forget about all of it by the next election.
Right.
I think if it comes to the next election, look, Luxon likes being a leader. He likes to position himself as an effective leader.
Yeah.
I think it also looks like a butt plug. I'm just going to say. And this is just a theoretical mental exercise. If he was to lose the next election, that glorious happy day where I'm instantly drunk, do you think he's the type of leader that will take his lumps, stay on and rebuild? Or do you think he would fall on his sword and bugger off because he's not going to get a knighthood?
I still think what we said last year, that if he was to lose last year, he wouldn't stick around. Who the hell wants to be looking for a knighthood and have to sit 3 years in opposition to do it, and then try and sit for 6 years in government to get there, when you can just basically retire, work part-time on various boards and live a luxurious life. I can't imagine he'd want to stick around, but could be wrong.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
And every time we mention them being a one-term government, that is extremely unusual for New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it did happen, I mean, that philosophy that they were talking about on the podcast of they need to get a lot done now. In other words, change the plan from a 9-year or a 6-year to a 3-year and see what you can get done. Because, I mean, like Labour, when they had a majority for the first time ever, they could have done whatever they liked, other than constitutional issues which require 75% in the House. But they could have done whatever they liked, and many of us would say they wasted an opportunity. With Luxon alongside, I mean, I guess if Winston is the handbrake, I mean, gosh, is this blasphemy of what I'm about to say? Are some of us grateful that Winston is there as a handbrake? Would it be so much more worse if it was just a two-headed taniwha? I feel dirty saying that. I want to go have a shower now, but is that actually a truth?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the trap for people like us and those of us in the chat that are really engaged in this process and game out every possible action and really comment on how good and bad things are. That's us, and we're an edge case when it comes to this. What about the person that just reads the odd headline every now and then, that catches the poll results once every 8 months or just in the lead up to the election, or makes their mind up on the day?
Yeah.
Like, that always catches people like us out. It's like, oh shit. So the message that had cut through was not the one that I thought was the most important thing.
Yeah.
So that's just, when you're talking to people that are in that camp, it's educating. It's trying to build a team to get the result that you want. But I think there's a lot of work that gets so far away, but also is not that far away, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to point out how this government has caused a net negative effect on everybody's life. Yeah. And at this stage, they won't have seen it. And it feels horrible to say this, but I hope that people do notice that in coming year, 2.
Yeah. Hey, g'day again, team. Hope you're enjoying the best of in this Christmas New Year break period, the best of BHN 2024. Just wanted to remind you as well that the merch shop is open during this time period. One of the ways we support ourselves and pay a few bills is obviously through the merch that we sell. We are sending out merch all the way through this Christmas period. So if you want to head to bhnshop.nz, you can see that there are some Chewie Fufu shirts there, Chewie blowing his fufu, some Nicky No Boats product there, both t-shirts and hoodies, buffer gear there as well, t-shirts and hoodies, and also the pattern Chewie BHNs. The other thing that's become quite popular in this last wee while is the sticker range we've got as well, which mirrors the merch on the t-shirt range that we've got. Again, we will be sending out merch during this Christmas New Year period. So if you order it, it will be on a courier or on the post or whatever you call it, certainly within a few days, and we'll get it off to you. You'll also find a few specials on that for limited stock. The stock, especially in the hoodies, is limited. It's actually limited in everything, but more so limited in the hoodies. So if you head to bhnshop.nz quickly to make sure you secure what you want from the merch that we have currently going. Thanks for supporting us through 2024. Let's get back to some more of the best ofs. Tova O'Brien had an interesting experiment with a panel last week. She got together like the alternative coalition. 3 people who used to be in National, ACT and New Zealand First. She got them together to have a chat about this current government. And she asked a really important question about did they, the people who had been there and done that, think that this government would last its full term? I think we'll go and have a look at that now. This is only 90 seconds, Chewie, and then we can get to it. So this is Heather Roy.
I think that I agree with with Chris. I don't like some of the tone either. And I think David's determined to have his discussion and have his select committee hearings. He's made that very clear.
Is it a priority for Act's base, though? Because how does it square with kind of traditional libertarianism? I know he's doing other things like charter schools and the Farmac funding and things as well, but is this...
I don't know the answer to that question, and I do wonder if he wouldn't have been better off looking at the Bill of Rights and having some mechanism through there about a level playing field and equality amongst people.
Will the coalition implode before 2026? Anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Probably.
Crikey.
More decisive, Heather.
Yeah. Come on, Heather.
Oh, look, I think if this is Winston's last shot and he wants to leave a legacy, there's still a thread of possibility that he might do the right thing and behave till the end. But I think the odds are against that.
What's it going to look like, that implosion?
Oh, mate, it's going to be really
entertaining.
Cool. It's going to be great to watch.
Co lived through it in 1997 with, what was her name? Alamein Kopu or something. Who's the one who you should be interviewing when it happens?
This is our alternative coalition reaching for the popcorn as democracy and the government crumbles in front of our very eyes.
There you go. So that was Chris Finlayson. Will the coalition crumble before 2026? A hard yes. Tau Hanare, a hard yes. Heather Roy, a probably Chewie. There's a certain working group podcaster who joins us occasionally who's been telling us this, since about 3 minutes after they signed papers that they wouldn't last the full term. There's 3 pretty experienced people who, no matter what you say, will still have, a bit of an ear on the internal workings because they'll know people who know people. What are your thoughts?
There's not a lot of things that I miss from being on Twitter. You might have that video up getting the double.
I do.
Cool.
Done.
Sorry, felt my brain breaking. There's not very many things that I miss from Twitter, right? But following Tau Henare is one of them. Because I find he's definitely one of those guys where you go, I don't agree with everything that you say, but the things that you say, I can see where you got to them.
Yeah.
And it's something that I miss on the right. And I would say he's probably closer to being a true centrist when we're talking about it. He'll go one way or the other. But he's had these interactions. I think he's right. It is for people like us that analyze all of this stuff and really get into politics. Yes, if this coalition explode, then it will be something pretty fucking interesting, and believe me, we will go into full hyperbole mode when that happens. But I think when you've got that group of 3 people and they're all agreeing, it's the personalities that they've got in the room. The leader of the coalition is so weak and is not used to that form of leadership, and dare I say it, he's not very good at it. You've got nobody controlling the dog and pony show. Winston will run that if he's allowed to, and I think the only thing that's holding it together is the fact that when he is on the world stage, he becomes a statesman. And when he's back in domestic politics, he's an absolute shit stirrer.
He's a cooker.
And then you've got Rimmer, who just wants to be the smartest kid in the debate club.
So true.
And we still don't know who's pulling his strings. Like I watched that interview with Guy and Espiner in the weekend, and that's a goddamn shit show. Like I've never seen Seymour as weak in an interview as I have in there. I don't know if we're going to have a look at it. I expect that we will at some stage, even if it's not tonight. But not being able to answer a question like, can New Zealand afford tax cuts at this stage, without disseminating, and I'm going to answer your question with an unrelated question and all of this sort of stuff. It's just an absolute shit show. And then Luxon doesn't have the spine, authority, or experience to pull these guys into line by going, you are minor coalition partners. I need you here, but you do not have the votes to dictate policy to me or dictate behavior to me. Get in line. He doesn't. He's treating it as like they've all got equal power in this, and they shouldn't. And I think a better leader would be able to express that more than going, well, you'll have to take it up with them. You know, you've got Seymour saying that Winston is still the least trustworthy politician in the House. You can't have your two minor party leaders sniping at each other like that.
Yeah. I don't want to burst a bubble there, but yeah, you missed that one, mate. That was Thursday night. We had a good chat about that. So
I wasn't that early. I watched it on the weekend, so I'm glad we've looked at it. But yeah,
let me offer one thing, and this is going to make me sound like Uncle Pat, just wanting everyone to be kind. The thing about the government failing before 2026, I think every New Zealander should want whatever colour government's in to do well for New Zealand. Now, we're not seeing that with this government. And I guess my little kind of side note to what you're saying is, as long as them falling over by 2026 doesn't harm the most vulnerable even more. Do you know what I mean? Like if you said to me, I want to see them get through this term and the vulnerable were harmed bad, or I want to see them fall over and the vulnerable were harmed even worse, then I'd pick the lesser of two evils. But I know it's not much of, I'm not putting much of an argument forward. It just makes me kind of think, in theory, don't we all want a government to be successful?
I think we've touched on this all the way through the show tonight. We would like politicians that are able to change their point of view based on new evidence and acknowledge that.
Yes.
And we'd like people with different ideological standpoints to at least acknowledge why this is better for the country.
Yes.
And I think this is the thing, is like, I'm not seeing very many people on the right that I would go, hey, look, I disagree with you on some pretty key points, but I see how you got there. I'm seeing a bunch of high-ranking ministers ignoring evidence, ignoring people working in those affected fields, going, hey, this is bad and we've seen it before. And they're ploughing on ahead. And it just seems to be, what's that adage in the tech industry? Move fast and break stuff.
Right.
You know, as seen as a positive. And that might be in the business space. It certainly isn't when you're talking about the government of a country.
Yeah.
Because the decisions that you're making and the things that you're breaking by moving so fast have direct effect on people's lives.
Yeah. Then the next thing you got to say, just kind of almost be a defeatist of my own argument, is what are they checking themselves for? So we heard last week that they're looking to rejig the FastTrack legislation, and that Seymour's hinting towards funding school lunches for an interim, for a time. And so straight away you kind of go, oh, so if they weighed up the evidence as we'd like, and they're changing their position, or are they just reading the polls and they realize that these are not things that are going to sit well with the voter?
Third option.
And hang on. And does it matter? I mean, if they were to do the right thing, even if it wasn't based on the research but the polls, does it actually matter? It still means they're doing the right thing, like school lunches.
Third option is something we've discussed on the show heaps, is like put out a really unpalatable product.
Yeah.
Take the flack for it for a bit, and then ramp it back down. You've still moved the needle in the direction that you want it. But you've been seen as like, okay, we've heard you. Yeah.
We'll meet you in the middle.
The FastTrack bill is the perfect example. It doesn't matter how many unpalatable parts of that you take out, like the the one that's been singled out is the minister's overall veto on anything. He can just wave in and go, this project goes ahead. And you can go, well, that's completely undemocratic and that sort of thing. And Forest and Bird spoke about this on their oral submission, which is well worth watching. But they go, yes, this is egregious and it must go, but it still leaves an overall package of policy that is so rushed, so poorly considered, and we haven't been given enough time to go through and see exactly how fucked this is structurally.
Yeah.
But you're taking a knee on this one thing, and yes, we're glad that you're going to take that out, but the rest of it is still fucked. Taking that one bit out doesn't fix it. So
do you think they're that calculating? Because that would be that's 4D chess they're playing there if they're doing it like that.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, and that's concerning as well. Like you go up against an adversary and you go, well, you know, he's playing his game and I'm playing mine, and you know, we're going to treat it as if they do know what they're doing, or is it just incompetence and ideology? And we've talked about how borderline corrupt or just outright corrupt some of this stuff is, with the input from the mining companies and the input from overseas lobby groups and that sort of thing. Do they know that they're being used? Are they willing participants in it? Is it just like, I can't think of like when the worm turns and the left gets in. I haven't seen a backswing like this from them. They always seem to be a little bit like, and please chat if you've got any examples where I'm wrong on this, let me know. But it's not like they went full austerity mode and then Labour came in and they're like, right, universal basic income, we're bringing it in, and there's nothing National can do about it for fucking 3 years. That sort of thing. It seems to be that ideological switch to the other side really, really rapidly in a way that we haven't before.
So we're also going to have a chat tonight about the latest news from the government and the idea that they are starting up a new gang unit. There are a lot of people who are saying things like it's just a rebranding of what's going on right now. They're looking for, you know, a new way to do the same old. And we're going to have joining us very shortly Harry Tam. Harry is going to be with us in just a couple of ticks. Whilst Harry is coming along to join in and say g'day to us, let's have a bit of a look at one of the questions we want to ask Harry, which is talking about, Harry is from hard to reach Māori communities, mobilising hard to reach Māori communities. On the news tonight, they had an interesting conversation. Now, no one's celebrating this gentleman who we all recognise right now, but the interesting conversation was why, and this will be something we speak to Harry about, why do people join gangs? What is the reason that people join gangs? And let's have a listen let's have a listen to some of the community workers that were on One News tonight talking about why do people join gangs. It's only a 45-second clip.
Court records show Case Selwyn was bullied at school and joined the Killer Bees after his father died for a sense of belonging. This community worker with 25 years experience has heard stories like that before.
If somebody's offering you friendship and a place to have a good night's sleep and food, why would you not join? The allure and the mystique of being in a club. Is it flashy things that you want to see on own a motorbike? Could be that.
And it could be what's happening at home.
A family in poverty, single mom with no job, uneducated, no male figure in the household.
Where are they?
Either with new families or in prison or gone elsewhere. So our mentors sometimes become their substitute dads.
So there's some conversation from some community workers on One News tonight. We welcome to the show Harry Tam. G'day, Harry. Kia ora. Welcome. You with us, Harry? Hello, we can't hear you, Harry. You might need to turn your mic on there, sir. Having a look for that, and we'll do that. Chewie, have you been across this this announcement very much at all?
About the gang task force, which is just a reheating of Simon Bridges' Task Force Raptor wet dream from last time round.
Yeah.
I skimmed over it this morning. I mean, they're talking about gang patches. I still haven't seen a definition of what is a gang patch. It just seems to be the police and the government going, trust us, we know.
Yeah,
which is worrying.
We will put in this place to do this. We're going to do it. You with us, Harry? It's probably one of the settings in your computer to assign a microphone to you. Sorry, dude. This is one of the perks, Chewie, of taking in lives rather than setting up before nines. It's all right, then. We'll figure it out. And if we don't figure it out, it'll be fine. We will do it another day. It's all good. Whilst Harry is having a look at that, why don't we play some of the rest of the story, which is actually about the announcement, and we'll see if we can get Harry onto the call before they go. So this is from One News Tonight. This is the actual story that leads into what this new task force is, gang task force.
The stuff of intimidation and fear, the government says, has to stop.
Gangs think that they've got control of the streets.
The Minister and Police Commissioner jointly announcing a new national unit and district teams to target gangs.
We will be looking particularly at how our intelligence is focused to ensure that we're able to collect the right information we need on gangs locally.
All right, let's just pause there for a second. So we've got Harry back then.
Can you hear me?
This one. Harry, you're there. We can hear
you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Oh, yep, cool. Yep, sweet ass. Cool.
Okay. So we'll just keep watching. This is the story from One News Tonight, Harry. You can hear everything clearly, okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so this is the story from One News. It's only got 90 seconds talking about what the announcement was around this new gang unit or gang units.
20 to 30 officers will be part of the national gang unit, and it'll be in place by July the 1st. 7 officers will staff each district team, but just how many of those there'll be is still to be determined. The units replace Operation Cobalt, which started as an effort to stem shootings across Auckland, but morphed into a major national anti-gang effort. But there are no set targets for this latest initiative.
We will know we've made a difference when we feel it in our communities.
Mark Mitchell says he's powering up police with incoming legislation, including banning patches and orders to break up large gatherings.
We want to inflict maximum damage to them.
Do we think that the gang members are just going to comply? You know, that's not going to happen. We're talking about people that will live and die by their patch.
A no-ringing endorsement from the union, which says gang units already exist.
The reality is this announcement hasn't come with money, it hasn't come with extra officers, so it is just going to increase demands.
Labor calling it a rebrand, and those who work to change gang member behaviour say it'll make their jobs harder.
So kaupapa such as this just puts them back into a box where they become even more marginalised and harder to reach.
Police say they'll reprioritise resources to get the units up and running, but the total cost won't be known until the budget is announced at the end of the month.
There you go. Harry, we're back with you. We got you twice. We got you one on the microphone, one on the camera. Beautiful.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Far away. Okay.
So listen, we've just heard the end of that wrap up said this will make, and they use the phrase hard to reach communities, which is obviously your organisation, make your job harder. Will this legislation make your job harder to reach those hard to reach communities?
No, because we already reached them, right? So where it will make it harder is for us to actually tackle the causes of gang membership and gang behaviour, right? Yep. So that's where the harder part will be. We don't have a problem engaging with hard to reach communities. That's what we specialise in. That's what we do really well.
We played a little clip while we were sorting out our connection as to why people join gangs. How will this, or will this, make any difference to the necessity for gangs, as some people see it, the reason people join?
Well, the thing is that it doesn't really address the social issues that give rise for people to join gangs. And like, we also got to differentiate the different types of gangs, right? So we can't assume that all gangs are the same, just like the use of that term organised crime. Organised crime is a very broad, set of criminal behaviours. And so I think if you actually reflect back, like where this all started, was pretty much post Second World War. All right. So you sort of had this sort of like the adoption of Keynesian economics, which meant the growth in manufacturing. And so you kind of had people flocking to the cities to work in the factories. Wellington's a classic because nine-eye tighter, right? They were the models for the new housing areas. And I think it was 1954, the Magenta report came out, and that sort of, it's almost like we're repeating the cycle. The Magenta report came about because of essentially two things. There was a girl that kind of went missing over a weekend, turned up and said she didn't like her stepfather, had a wonderful weekend of sex with this gang. And then there was those two girls that killed their mother down in Christchurch. And that sort of created a whole furore. And the Magenta, which is a law firm, did this big report, and it was circulated in all the households. And interestingly enough, at that time, youth crime was actually going down. But because the pandemonium that was created by this Magenta report, it created this moral panic, right? And so if you reflect 1954 to where we are now in 2024, you've got exactly a similar scenario. So from that time, that was the age of the bodgies and woodgies, the milk bar cowboys, and eventually the bikies came along. So our people were sort of emulating like the Hells Angels in America, popular youth culture, and all the rest of it, right? So the whole thriving economic situation also meant that there weren't enough people filling in the factories. So we had urban drift coupled with the process of assimilation. So during the Magenta report, that period, that whole moral panic, was where your state care came into place. They were known as juvenile delinquents, put into state care. So if you look at the original Mongols, if you like to call them, they were predominantly Pākehā. So the mob is probably the only institution in this country that's been absolutely captured by Māori. So it's a Pākehā, basically Pākehās, the Stafford brothers, the Gary Gerbies. And, Gary actually talks about his time in the boys' home and how he was sexually abused and physically abused. So if you take a look at what's happened with urban drift with Māori, they ended up filling in those boys' homes. But prior to that, the whole thing of tikanga Māori was being stripped away, whether it was the Tohunga Suppression Act, they're not allowed to use the language and all the rest of it. By the time those young boys entered into those boys' homes, where they were sexually and physically and mentally abused, so that's where the violence comes from. So if you want to understand the violence within the sort of indigenous ethnic gangs, that's where it comes from. That was taught to them, all right? So their culture was taken away, a new culture was implanted into them, which is violence and sexual violence. So if you wind the clock back to the 70s and 80s, gang rape was quite a prominent crime, all right? And so if you want to understand the genesis of all that, where does it come from? So on one hand, you take away the culture and then you implant a new culture. And so these people, when they were 16, they were released. They were no longer a state ward. They were basically just thrown out on the street. So in that process, people become institutionalized, right? And no one lives in a cultural void. So they've adopted a new culture of violence. And that's probably where the no narking rule comes from, right? No narking, so you don't narc off your perpetrators who were your carers, whether it was in the boys' home in Ipuni or in Lake Hellas, you don't narc, right? So that's filtered through. And so if you want to look at the bikie gangs, why I say they're different, they're a generational phenomenon, right? So if you take a look here in Wellington, you had like the 25 Club back in the 60s and 70s. And by the early 70s, they were gone. They were replaced by the Satan slaves, right? And likewise, in Timaru, there was the Highwaymen, Dunedin, there's coffin cheaters. And by the 70s, you had the road knights, the epitaph riders. Was a whole different generation of bike gangs. And now there's another generation, predominantly influenced by the 501s, right? So there are different reasons for joining gangs, right? So if you want to look at the indigenous ethnic gangs, which is where the biggest gangs are, so if you follow the whakapapa that I've just explained to you, those people that were released from those homes are heavily traumatized. That trauma has never been treated. So we've got intergeneration transfer of dysfunction going into the fourth generation. All right. So if we keep on doing the stuff like tough on crime, put them into boot camps and all the rest and traumatize them some more, it's going to be even worse. Right. It's not an answer. So do we want to fix the problem and put our hands up and say, as the state, we did a terrible thing here? So it's really interesting how quiet the Royal Commission Interstate Care has been, because they're not part of this conversation, where in fact they should be, right? So does that give you a kind of an answer?
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I hear it, I can follow it. I also know there's going to be a community out there that's going to go, that was 50 years ago. You can't blame a 16-year-old for what happened 50 years ago. And if that was the person watching this right now, what would you say to them, Harry?
Well, the thing is, it might have been 16 years ago, but trauma never goes away, you know. And the thing is, that's the reality. I mean, if you wonder why each generation is worse than the other, it's because it's untreated trauma. And, you know, I mean, all you have to do is look at, you know, the former Prime Minister's science advisors' reports. They talk about this. It's not Harry Tam that made this up. Every psychologist that's worth his bloody penny will tell you the same thing, right? So the point is, do we want to recognise the research and factor that into what we do? Because right now, like I say, we've got a repetition of the Masengard report, where you create this moral panic. And this whole thing about gang and patches intimidation, well, we did some sums, right? Go back to 2021. The New Zealand population that time was, I think, was 5.123 million. And the government said, the police said there was about 8,000 gang members. So when you work that on a ratio basis, you've got 1.5 gang member to every 1,000 New Zealanders, right? So I then question, I believe that most New Zealanders actually don't see real life gang members with their patches on, all right? Yeah. Unless they live in Marae Nui, Flaxmere, Porirua, where there are concentrations of gangs. Where most New Zealanders see gang members with their patches on is on the mass media. Every time there's a gang story, there's a patch there, right? Yeah. So that's where we're going wrong, because we're not actually recognising what this is all about. Because like this new bill, I believe they're going to ban having patches on social media. Well, if you take a look at every government report from 1979 right through to Roper, every report talked about the need to control sensationalising gang reporting. And that hasn't happened. So every time there's a story, oh, here's a gang member, here's a patch. You know, you just throw a patch on any patch, right? Front page and on TV, you know? And so people start believing this. But in real terms, like I say, do the sums. You work it out for yourself. Yeah. We worked it out to be 1.5 to every 1,000. So the reality of it is sensational media, hype up, moral panics. So that's what we've got, right?
I think what you've got as well is seen around the world. I remember that Bowling for Columbine documentary with Michael Moore. And Michael Moore goes into South Central Los Angeles, tree-lined, looked lovely, and he went to the corner where Rodney King was beaten. And he had to talk to a professor there, and the professor said something like, violence, violent crimes is trending down. But he says that the coverage of violent crimes has gone up 600%. So in other words, the public thought they were living in a much more dangerous time and place. But actually that's just because what the media was doing with the story, you know. I remember he asked him something like, if you went to if you had the opportunity to go and film, to a reporter, go and film a guy being saved from a burning building or a gang shooting, which would you go to? And he went gang shooting every time. Better video, you know, literal blood on the floor. So I hear you. I was going to ask as well, because you talked about, you know, the intergenerational issues and what the state has done in this. Would an official apology from the Crown make a difference? Like, I can still remember quite emotionally when an Australian Prime Minister apologised for what happened to their Indigenous people, one aspect of it. Would that make a difference? Would that be a single step towards 500 or 1,000 steps of kind of healing of that?
No. Well, I mean, they make the apology and back it up with the resources,
right,
for the people to treat their trauma and all the dysfunctions that's come over the generations. Yes, it would. But I think we know from the Australian example was that, they made the apology, they pumped some money into the Aboriginal community and they forgot about it.
Yeah, right.
And, like I talked to some of the people when I was at TPK. I went over there to talk to the youth justice people and they said, look, they don't really care. They've given us all this money. They don't even evaluate what we do, And if that's what happened in Aussie, if that's what's going to happen here, I can't see it myself. But apologies are hollow unless you actually, show that you mean it by action,
Yeah. Chewie, what have you got, sir?
Oh, so much I'm agreeing with there, Harry. I don't know if you know my history, but I grew up around the peripherals of a motorcycle gang in Timaru. Most of my dad's friends group were part of the Devil's Henchmen.
Yeah.
So I see exactly what you're describing, like the explosion in talking about these gang tangi processions and I guess shows of strength around them as this new thing that's just so out of the gate. Look, there's one in Timaru in the late 70s. Shut down the whole road, and it was for a funeral of a gang president. And this was not uncommon in Timaru. It is not a new phenomenon.
Yeah.
And exactly what you describe, it's people's reaction of being put on the outside of society, and the quite understandable reaction of like, well, if you don't want me to be part of your society, fuck your society. I'm going to make my own. And I'm going to come together with all the other guys that you reckon shouldn't be part of your society, and we're going to make our own tribe. If people haven't got a community to join, they'll make their own. And having a government come out and going, we don't want you, you have no value. What's that going to make people do?
It's funny
They'll
the way
just
you
retreat into what they know.
It's funny the way you say it as well, Chewie, because we're literally hearing the Prime Minister and Mark Mitchell say things like, if these guys want all the same rights and privileges as New Zealanders, then they've got to start acting like New Zealanders. But the way you describe it, Chewie, is almost like, well, you've told us you don't want us to be part of society, so we won't. So it's even like that threat of be good boys and girls and maybe we'll give you a cookie isn't going to work.
Well, when you take when you take a look at that picture that you just showed, I mean, wait till when Charlie dies and see what happens. There'll be a long procession and it'll go on for bloody days, right? So our people do nothing different from normal people when they grieve, yeah? Some of the behaviours like sticking their asses out of fucking windows and doing burnouts, it's not just the gangs, right? Other, boy races and all that do it as well. Now, I don't condone it. I think it's a terrible thing that they do that because there's a safety aspect and it just brings on a whole lot of, waste of space, really. But anyway, look, what I'd like to comment on is this thing of this new version of the police task force Raptor or whatever they call it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, what I want to talk about is that the research that talks about special police units is that they evolve a culture of their own, right? And we saw some of this during the old Department of Correction back in the 90s when they had the Goon Squad. I don't know whether you guys remember the Goon Squad, where they were smashing beer bottles over their penis as part of their induction into it, and then they flew down to bloody Christchurch, Paparoa prison, and they bloody damn near killed an inmate because all this thing that they were all geared up to, right? So the research tells us where these units will end up at. And more, and examples of that in New Zealand is, do you remember the team policing units? They were known as task force, right? They very quickly, because that was Gideon Tate and task force, and that was set up the thin blue line to tackle the epitaph riders and the Blossom festivals and all the rest during the 70s, right? And very quickly they were then used as a political tool for the Dawn raids, right? On the Pacific community. And if that wasn't bad enough, they became the Red Squad and shoved long truncheons into Springbok protesters. So this is the danger of these special police units, is that the research already tells us where they eventually end up at, right? And then on the other hand, these search and seizure laws, right? So all you have to do is have a look at Lord Scarman's, the Scarman report. Do you know anything about the Scarman report?
No, I don't.
No.
Well, Lord Scarman was brought in to investigate the Toxteth Brixton riots, right? That took place in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And it went on for bloody days and you know, and it spread. And he identified the SPG, which is a special police group, right? Again, overuse of the sus laws. And that was search and seizure laws, right? And eventually the community and the breakdown of communicating with communities. And in the end, the whole thing just imploded into this massive riot that went on for bloody days and wrecked Brixton, Toxteth, and so forth. So the research and the evidence is there. We just don't want to know about it. But be aware, you know, gangs today, who knows who's next? And I'm not scaremongering. Tell me if I'm wrong, you know.
Hey, a couple of things. Have you ever thought about writing a book? Getting all this stuff down, getting the history, doing it? Because when you come on and talk like this, me and Chewie are like, oh no, tell me more. I mean, have you ever thought about putting this into print? I'd like to read that book.
Yeah, well, read our submission.
Yeah, sorry. Harry sent me their submission and he asked me, have you read it? And I'm like, it's on my to-do list. It is. I'll read it tomorrow. I'll sit down and read it tomorrow. Hey, but the other thing is,
if you can find me a publisher, I'd gladly write a book.
I'll speak to some people. Like I'm not just like, I'll knock it out. I know a couple of people in that world because they're really interesting. The other thing is, would you speak? There's been a few people in the chat who have said this, and I'm interested by it. Would you speak to Mark Mitchell? Like if I said to Mark Mitchell, come and talk to Harry on this show, would you do that?
Of course I would. I talk to everybody. I talk to anyone.
Yep.
I don't have hang-ups about people.
Yeah. And I think the most important question for me for the day was, how was the table tennis?
It wasn't too bad. I had a hit with a guy from England he's in the top 100, and fuck, he was fast, you know.
Just to let the rest of the people, when I spoke to Harry or text Harry this afternoon, he said to me, I'm off playing table tennis, but I'll see if I can get there by 9:30.
I made it, bro. I made it.
You did. Hey, we really appreciate you. I genuinely, sorry I haven't got you back to your submission yet. I will definitely make time for that in the next 24, 48 hours. I'll send it to Chewie as well. He can have a good squiz at it.
Yeah.
We'll go from there. But look, we love having you on. We'll have you on anytime you want. You can just come and educate all of us. It's great. Is there anything else you want to leave us with about what we've been talking about?
Anything else that came out today? Hey, one thing. Will Luxon apply the same rule on Mark Mitchell and himself that he applied on Melissa Lee and the Minister of Disabilities?
It's a good question.
Hey, a rule for them, for the boys, and a different rule for the women. Hey, he should sack himself because he's sacked. Well, come on, you know,
consistency here. I don't
know. Yeah, come on, guys. You know what I'm about. You know, like you can't have a massive fuck up where you can't fucking count, and the Prime Minister couldn't count.
Yeah,
is he going to sack himself? And will he sack Mark Mitchell? Those are the questions you guys need to be asking.
All right.
Because if that's the rule that he used with Melissa and the other one, or was it because she was Asian? Who knows?
Jeez. Our show's now being produced by Harry Tam. I like that. We'll get to it. Hey, Harry, thanks for joining us tonight, mate. That was awesome.
Cheers, mate. Good night.
All right, team, that's us for another episode. We'll continue these best ofs right the way through till we start going live again on Monday, the 13th of January. If you've enjoyed this show, then you can thank, along with me, our patrons. Our patrons are the ones who are responsible for being able to bring this to you, who have also kept us independent and free from any kind of outside pressure from outside sources. In the week leading up to our break, so in the week leading up to the 20th of December, these patrons joined in those 7 days. Gray, Dr. Nat, Kathleen, Jimmy's Nan, Cezanne Big Q, Caleb Watson, Lance Juverton, Ed Hyde, Howard Vicarage, Doris Queener, Kiwi Bear, Syntax Error, Rena KH, Kerry Moses, Max Power, and Sue Locke. All those people joined in the 7 days leading up to when we went on break. If you have joined since then, you will not see your name in the credits because this is a pre-record. I probably will see your name in the credits in the last week of pre-record because I will update it. I also want to mention David Thompson Rules, who in those 7 days, he also upped his membership. He upped levels from, I think patron to super patron. So thanks to David Thompson for doing that as well. If you've enjoyed what you've seen tonight, if you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to be in the credits that are about to roll, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Stay safe out there in New Zealand. Remember, driving 5 kilometres per hour slower will only get you there a couple of minutes later. Don't take risks on the roads, and we will see you when we come back live again on the 13th of January as you continue to enjoy the best of the best of the best ofs here in BHN.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have the hand out for